Hi everyone. I'm going to start today's video off by restating some of the things that we have been discussing in the previous videos and then talk about something we need to do to bring those different elements together. Um, so basically the last couple of videos we've talked extensively about the problem making section of your In Defense of essay. We talked about how to identify your audience, identify the problem, and out of that have a specific purpose for your essay. Um, we've also talked about finding your particular rhetorical approach. We're going to add to that a little bit in this video and some of the other videos this week. And then we talked at length about different types of claims that we can make and different ways we can develop those claims. And that was for both the problem-making section and also the solution section. As I've said, in the problem-making, even though it is an introduction to your topic and it's a place where you establish your audience and problem, you are making an argument about the problem and trying to prove that that problem is actually real. So you're making claims and you're developing those claims to the best of your ability. And then when you get to your solution, then you're also making claims about how your topic should be seen as a solution to the problem or how your topic needs to be reimagined or redescribed to your audience so that they are convinced that it is good for them, worthwhile, enjoyable, so on and so forth. So those are the elements we have, and this week we're going to continue to look at the solution part of the essay. Once you have that problem making fully established, how are you going to respond? How are you going to develop your argument in defense of and also in praise of your topic? But before we do that, I want to talk briefly about connecting the two parts together. How to transition from the problem making section into the solution section, and how it's these transitions that you're going to use to also state the purpose of your essay. We're going to look at where Barbara Holland does this as an example. And we're also going to look at how Barbara Holland transitions from paragraph to paragraph. So not from problem making to solution, but simply paragraph to paragraph within the problem making or paragraph to paragraph within the solution. So we're just going to look at a couple places that I'll use as examples to give you some vocabulary about the different types of transitions you can make. And then it's going to be up to you to continue to look at the Barbara Holland essays we've read and will continue to read and look at how she's transitioning from paragraph to paragraph and how she's moving from problem to solution. So let me pull up a worksheet here. Okay, so this worksheet is in two parts, and like the rhetorical approach worksheet, as I fill this out and as we complete it in these videos, I'll make this document available to you. But for now, we're gonna build up with the essays that we have read so far. So I call this section structuring your rhetorical approach for the In Defense of essay. And this is the how to transition from problem making to solution. Why I call it structuring your rhetorical approach, not finding your rhetorical approach, is once you know what that approach is, the Knapp's approach that says something like, you don't do this because of how you feel about it, but you should do it because it feels different than what you think. How do you structure that? How do you then move from a problem-making section to a solution in that type of approach? Same thing if we look at travel getting there. The approach, the rhetorical approach is, you don't do this because you prefer these other options, but you should consider doing this once again. So in that rhetorical approach, how do you structure it? How do you move from problem making to solution? Barbara Holland is our model for this. She shows us how to do it, and we always look to her to learn how to do this in our own essay. So right here, you see these are the titles of our the 6 essays that we're reading, and we've read 3 of them now. And for the 3 that we've read, I've already identified where the transitions happen from problem making to solution. at least in their first part of the transition, because often what we'll see is she uses whole paragraphs to move from problem to solution. And so we're going to just walk through these very briefly and talk about what they transition between, and just even identify how they're full paragraphs, but also in the fact that they're full paragraphs, that they restate or state the purpose of the essay and make it clear what she's trying to argue. So we have naps and travel getting there and cigarettes. And even this list, you could see that there are 2 different transitions in naps. There are only 1 transition in travel getting there, and there's 3 different transitions in cigarettes. And so we'll talk about why, and each of them has a subtlety that we can dig into really quickly. So I'm going to start with naps, and I'm going to pull it up. We see here that on page 37, there is a reference to if we'd been differently nurtured. It's a 3rd paragraph of the essay. And then later on the essay on 39, it's time to rethink naps. I'm going to go there right now. And we're going to see these transitions in action. So let's talk about the first one. If we'd been differently nurtured, we too would have taken a nap. Now, I want to make one distinction. I started this video by saying, how do you transition from the problem to the solution? Those are kind of big categories of areas that need to be developed in this essay. But there's one other skill that we did talk about in our reading from the Audio's Strunk and White packet, which was anecdoting, using anecdotes at the beginning of an essay or at some point in the essay to tell a personal story of the problem related to the topic, or a personal story that represents a solution to the topic. In naps, we get a story from Barbara Holland, the first 2 paragraphs of the essay, in which she didn't understand why people were napping. She was American, she was traveling abroad, and because they didn't know, her and her friends, that napping happened at the same time every day, they were kind of left out. They didn't know what to do. They couldn't return this boat they'd rented, and they were the only ones who weren't tucked away and sleeping at that time. And so she uses this story to represent, or introduce at least, the problem. But I want to make it distinct from the actual problem-making section. And when we talked about naps, we said that the problem-making section pretty much, in its specificity to its audience, starts with Americans are afraid of naps and goes on from there. But this paragraph actually helps Barbara Holland transition from her story into the larger problem making and audience that she'll then develop for the next couple pages. So that's all we're seeing here, a story. And she begins her transition paragraph by evaluating the story. She says, if we'd been differently nurtured. And we know she's not in the story anymore. She's not telling a story. She's commenting on it now. We too would have taken a nap, but we were Americans, condemned from the age of 4 to trudge through our sleepless days. She introduces Americans, and then ends the paragraph with Americans are afraid of naps. We then get right into the next paragraph, which fully begins the problem-making section, and even connecting the word anxious here to the word afraid here. And this is one of the paragraph-to-paragraph transitions we'll talk about soon, called twist ties. But for now, we're just seeing a large move from anecdote to problem-making. So that's the first one in naps. The second one, after she goes on talking about how scary the American nap is and why, what the reasons are, she finally, on the bottom of 39, finishes her argument of the problem-making section and decides that it's time to offer a solution. And she simply says, in one short sentence paragraph, it's time to rethink the nap from both the corporate and the personal viewpoint. Very simple. It's a simple transition using this idea of rethinking. The basic idea is that in all the pages before, as she develops the problem making, she's stating and arguing that this is how her audience currently thinks about naps. And her argument to follow is going to be a way to rethink naps. in a more positive light. So from negative, from criticism to praise. It's very short. This is probably it's the second shortest transition paragraph we'll see in any of the essays we read. But what's important to note is that it also establishes the purpose of the essay. The purpose of the essay is to rethink the nap from both the corporate and the personal viewpoint. And that's all we get after this transition. It gives us examples of how to think about the nap on business, and then if we're at home. So that transitions, and this is the best one we started looking at when we first looked at naps, to see a move from problem to solution. So that is our two transitions in naps. She can use the rethink posture because of the rhetorical approach that she has. And her approach is, you feel this way about naps, you should feel a different way. You think this way about naps, you should think another way. So her transition and her statement of purpose is very direct because of it. Now it's going to be a little different in the others because they take a different rhetorical approach. But let's go to travel getting there. Here it is. And we're going to look at the transition that we get in this essay. And it's only one. We only get one transition in this essay from problem to solution. And so after she kind of introduces this problem, and the problem is that travel is faster, less interesting, and less fun. And she explains to us the way it's less fun and gets into the plane and its problem, gets into the car and its problem. Then she finally, on page 90, uses a very simple expression to begin a paragraph that transitions her from the problem making to the solution. And so she's done with planes and cars, and she says, stepping into a train on the other hand. It's basically her audience was looking one way or thinking one way, and she's just redirecting their attention a new way. On the other hand, look over here. And then she says, you were instantly away from home. The adventure began at once. And then here's a nice statement of purpose. This is what she's going to try to convince us of. The train is or was a pleasure in itself. And that's what the rest of the essay is about. She's trying to prove to us that it's a pleasure in and of itself. It doesn't need to be fast. It doesn't need to be efficient. It just needs to be interesting and fun and pleasurable. And that's the rest of the essay. So very, again, simple language to transition from problem to solution, just on the other hand. And then another statement of purpose, or kind of a thesis of sorts. The train is a pleasure in itself. And from there, the rest of the essay is going to try to prove that with its claims and with the way it develops those claims. So a longer paragraph with this one than we see in naps. Last one we're going to go to is cigarettes. And look at the transitions in that essay. Give me a second to scroll there. Oh, here we go. And here we've said that there are 3 different transition paragraphs. And they're all at the beginning. We have the first one, now that we've been told half to death. The second one, well, it's time someone explained. And there, I said it. And then whatever happens after that is going to be her argument. So we have to think about the transitions in this essay based on what we have already discussed about this essay, that it doesn't go into great detail about the problem. And it's primarily because the audience already knows the problem. They've been told the problem for such a long time. They understand it. They've possibly been affected by it, that she doesn't need to remind them of it. She doesn't need to give them language to remember how much they dislike it. And so what we see in this essay is that we don't really have much of a problem-making section other than this first paragraph. But even this first paragraph can be seen as the last paragraph of a problem-making section that doesn't ever exist. You can imagine that before she starts the essay, now that we've all been told half to death, that everything the audience has been told about why cigarettes are problematic fills this white space before the essay even starts. She knows her audience has heard this. It's part of the problem making. And she wants to transition out of that problem into a solution. And she uses this first paragraph to transition from that problem, unstated in this case, to the solution when she says, well, now that we've heard all these things, people ask these questions. How could we possibly have done such a thing? Whatever possessed us, and not just once, mind you, but over and over for years, decades, in heaven's name, why? So she almost transitions with a set of questions. And then the next two paragraphs answer, or at least begin to answer that question and tell us what the essay will be about. She says, well, it's time somebody explained. We did it because it was fun, it felt good, it felt good. And the rest of the essay is going to try to convince us of why people used to smoke and give specific claims to prove, or at least to state, that it was fun in certain ways, and then specific examples and definitions to prove that what those claims are saying is actually true. So again, she says these three transitions in three back-to-back paragraphs that then get us into the rest of the argument of the essay. And when I say argument, I mean the solution portion. So right now we have three different essays with three different approaches to transition paragraphs that move between a problem making and a solution section, or even move between an anecdote, a problem making, and a solution section. And we're going to add to this list as we go, as we read cats and buying things and books. We'll add to the list, and then I'll again share with you so that you have the document. I'm going to come away from this for a second, because now we're going to transition into one other discussion of transitions, no pun intended, and that is not how to transition from problem making to solution, but it's more specifically how to just transition from paragraph to paragraph. And we can think about this as, okay, when I'm in the problem making section, how am I moving from paragraph to paragraph in a cohesive and clearly organized way? And I had you read from Audio Strunk and White, The Ways to Connect. In Ways to Connect, it gave you two examples, twist ties and captions, about ways to move from one paragraph to the next, but I've added to it a couple more. These ones you're probably more familiar with in the essays that you've written before, but I add them here so that we have a complete list, or at least 4 different options to move from paragraph to paragraph. And we're going to give each of these categories a definition and then examples from Holland. And that will be the end of the video after that, looking at all these different ways that she makes her argument clearly develop. So the first way to connect paragraph to paragraph would be time order or spatial phrases. So you can almost think about like dependent clauses, what we practiced in our syntax practice. And these transitions use prepositions that establish time and or place, where something happens or when in a sequence of action something happens. And we see these oftentimes, and we just actually looked at one of them in Cigarettes on page 18. She begins the entire essay with a now that we've all been told half to death about the medical horrors lying in wait for smokers. Now is a preposition that is indicating when something is happening in a sequence. Even though we don't have a paragraph that comes before this now, as we said, it's almost like there was an invisible paragraph that's just not stated there. But look through the Barbara Holland essays, see where else she's using these time order or spatial phrases to move from one paragraph to the next. Another transition that you're familiar with would be a transition of logical development, something that adds complexity to a previous statement. Now, you are probably most familiar with this transition language as therefore, moreover, therefore, did I say that? However, nevertheless. These are kind of academic sounding transition language that you've used in your essays before. If you noticed, Barbara Holland doesn't use any of those stuffy academic sounding logical development claims, but she still does use transitions that develop the logic of an idea They're just a little bit more conversational. A good note to always keep in mind when you're writing, I'm not just talking about transitions anymore, but write in a voice that's natural to you. Don't write in a way that you would never talk. So if you say but in conversation instead of however, then say but in your writing. I don't think any of you actually ever say furthermore in your conversation with friends. So don't write it in your paper. You want your voice to come off as natural. You want to be in control of your tone, and choosing language helps you do that. So here in Barbara Holland's example, we see her using the logical development phrase, and of course. I can hear her saying that in conversation very naturally. So on 38 in Naps, she ends one paragraph by saying, even the housewife, taking advantage of the afternoon lull, knows at the deepest level of consciousness that the phone is about to ring. That's the end of the paragraph. These two lines represent the end of the paragraph there. So she has been developing the problem. She's saying that there's this fear, this deep level of consciousness that the phone's going to ring. It's this anxiety that we have that we know she's developed throughout the problem making. And then she's going to continue her logical development of the problem with the next paragraph. She says, and of course, those of us with proper jobs, there's the problem of finding a bed. So it's kind of the next logical development in her thinking. She moves away from not just the anxiousness, but to practicality and ability to find a bed. So that's what we would call logical development. See if you can find those. Again, you're not going to find therefores, however, moreovers in Barbara Holland, but you're going to find things like this, and of course, and others. The two you read about are next. One of them, the first one, is called twist ties. And this is where you take a key word or set of words from the last line of one paragraph and use a synonym, antonym, metaphor, or theme in the first line of the next paragraph that relates to the previous one. So this is best seen in an example from cigarettes on page 20. She's talking about how cigarettes build community. People sharing cigarettes help them feel accepted. And she ends the paragraph with a quote from Shakespeare that says, and calls them brothers, friends, and countrymen. Here, I highlighted all these words, brothers, friends, and countrymen, because in the beginning of the following paragraph, she transitions into a deeper understanding of this idea and then actually into a new idea by using the synonym to brothers and friends and countrymen of comradeship, comrade. This basically means brother, friend, close companion. And so instead of just repeating the same language, besides the feeling of having a brother or friend, she changes it to a synonym, but that connects the two paragraphs nicely together. What we also see here is the word besides. This almost sounds like a logical development. She's going to move somewhere beyond comradeship. So it's kind of a two-in-one. But for our sake right now, we're looking at the fact that the twist tie comes in the form of a synonym here. Lastly, we have captions. And this means to end a paragraph with a mini resolution and then begin the next paragraph with an unexpected intensification or escalation. Basically, that means that your reader, when they get to the end of the paragraph, thinks, because of the way you've ended the idea, that that idea is done, that you're going to move on, that you're going to maybe use a logical development transition and move on to a new idea. And they think that for a second, but then you begin the next paragraph by intensifying that same idea that you had previously been writing about in the paragraph before. So we have this great example from Naps. This is getting near the end of Barbara Holland's problem-making section, but she's still developing the different ways that we're afraid of or scared of or unwilling to nap. She ends one paragraph by saying, American employers do not see the afternoon 40 winks as refreshing the creative well springs of mere employees. they see it as goofing off. So, and this is the one paragraph I looked at when I was talking about the style portfolio skills that Holland uses so well. And she ends this paragraph with they, the employers, the American employers, the bosses, see napping as goofing off. And you think that that idea is going to be complete. She's going to move on to a new idea, or maybe even continue to talk about how the bosses are the ones that create this fear. But still, it feels like this idea has been finished. But then she begins the next paragraph by then putting that same idea, they see it as goofing off, onto the audience. She says, apparently most of us agree. So where we thought that the idea ended by blaming them, blaming the American employers as part of the problem, she then intensifies the idea saying, actually, we're part of the problem because we agree with them. And then she moves into that paragraph where she talks about the ways in which we see napping as goofing off. So there are your 4 types of transitions to move from paragraph to paragraph. Again, whether that's in the problem-making section or in the solution section, this is simply how to connect your paragraphs together, connect your ideas together so that they read smoothly and clearly. And that's going to be it for the video today. We'll add to this list, structuring your rhetorical approach as we read Katz, Buying Things, and books, because we'll also be talking about how to find your rhetorical approach in these essays and build off of that other worksheet that we started in the previous video. So until then, when we pick up with Katz and Buying Things and books, keep looking at the Barbara Holland essays we've read. Look for these transitions in action and learn to imitate them. All right, bye.